Most investors are left in the dark. They wire money into a deal, then they hear nothing. Or worse, inconsistent updates filled with jargon and vague numbers. So they don't make sense. Now, the problem is lack of communication. This leads to confusion, mistrust, and loss of confidence in the deal and in the operators themselves. At Faris Capital Partners, we built our entire investor experience around a brand promise that is outstanding communication. In fact, we're so serious about it that we offer a communication guarantee that if we miss our monthly update, we owe our investors a steak dinner. Today, we're sharing why we made this promise to our investors and how it reflects on our deeper mission. John, it's great to be here with you.
So good to be here, Mark. I was actually thinking a little bit about habits this morning. I had actually gotten away from ice baths during the colder months. And how it started was I have an ice machine in the garage that, produces ice for the ice baths. And it kind of froze up one day in the cold weather, and it took me like a week to kind of like look it up and figure out how to fix it. And just, all of a sudden, no more ice baths. All it took was just that week off to just fall out of the habit. So I got back into it today. I was feeling a little sore, and I'm like, I don't normally feel sore. What's going on? And I'm like, maybe it's because I'm not doing ice baths. And so it's an interesting thing with habits, right? It takes a long time to form a good one, but it takes a second to break one. But the reason I was thinking about it is it's kind of how we think about communication, right? With these guarantees, it's like, having that habit of just consistent communication. It's really a mechanism within the company to ensure that we're super tight on all the details. Mm-hmm. But here's an example. This past monthly update on the 30th fell on a Sunday. And so like all day long, I'm like texting Shristey, hey, are they ready to go? Is everything set? It's Sunday. If something goes wrong here. And, we laughed a little bit when you mentioned the steak dinner. And, it is a light kind of idea. But, at the end of the day, Mark, if we miss one of our properties' monthly updates, that could be like a $10,000 hit to the company. So you better believe we're going to make sure those go out.
Well, John, and I was texting Shristey that same day. So it's interesting. We're both texting Shristey.
Well, I have
like a marketing director.
Yeah, that's right. I have a 1 p.m. like on the 30th and the 28th of February, like reminder set. So as soon as I got that, I'm like, I don't see him in my inbox. Shristey, are we good to go? And so great minds think alike. But it's so important to us because just as investors, we've been on the other side, right? And we've had that poor communication experience and have felt left in the dark. And so really, I remember our first conversation, months before we started Faris Capital Partners, and we were just sort of having an ideation session on what we wanted to look like. It was actually one of the first things you touched on with me. You're like communication, right? Strong communication. So, to learn more about Faris Capital Partners, this is one element of what we do. Go to fulloutinvesting.com. We have an incredible video. It's 50 minutes long. You can watch it at 1.5 speed if you're pressed for time. But it just really gets into not only the nuts and bolts of how this style of investing works, but more specifically how we approach these investments, how we mitigate risk, and how we deliver exceptional returns. So you'll find the video, a sample deal, and an opportunity to book a call in with Mark or myself if you'd like to learn more. So great resource that you'll want to be taking advantage of.
Yeah. And so just building into this idea of habits. So I was actually reading about Jerry Seinfeld when he was writing, he had his big calendar up beside him and he would write on a daily basis. And so every day he was able to check off or put an X through the days that he actually wrote. And so his whole thing was don't break the chain. That was his statement. Don't break the chain. Don't break the chain. You miss one day, you break the chain. And so that's where it relates really well to communication, because when you're inconsistent, it's easier to be inconsistent. If you don't miss it all, it's easier to keep it going and to keep the streak and to not break the chain. And so it all ties back to this mission that we have, John. And this is like right from the get-go, is to go full out for our investors and to provide the best investing experience in the world. And so this is something that it's two parts. So the full out is about being passionately engaged. And so none of this, you're just a number. And then the best investing experience in the world is more of a aspirational pursuit. And so how do we get there? We collect feedback from our investors and from our team as well on a weekly basis, and we look to improve. And so whenever there's like a mishap, because there's no perfect companies out there, but whenever you do get feedback, it's really to look at that feedback and say, hey, listen, is this just a misplaced complaint, or is there any truth to this? And look at it from the investor's point of view. And so we're always looking for improvement. So whenever we have any sort of, if there's a slight comment or even if there's like a follow-up for something, it's like, why are they following up with this? How can we get ahead of this next time so that they're not having to think about it? Because if they're sending a request, there's probably other investors that are thinking of it, and we should be proactive in all that. So if we fix that on an ongoing weekly and monthly basis, the beauty is over time, you become the best company that you can be. And the natural byproduct is if the best in the world is over there, the way you get to over there is not an overnight thing. It's a ongoing pursuit by continually and consistently getting feedback and then making improvements along the way. And so this communication guarantee that we're going to talk about, it all ties back to this mission of the best investing experience in the world.
Yeah, Mark. And there was actually a great recent example of that. We send out our updates in PDF format. So an email goes out with a link to that, PDF. You click the link and it takes you to a web page where you have full access. You can download it, whatever you want. We've just found that ensures on-time delivery because sometimes attachments can get caught up in spam filters. So all that said, we had an investor who, when they clicked the link, it didn't work. Now, have 3 or 4 people on our team check the links before we send them out, right? So I'm checking the links. I'm reading the copy before it goes out. I've helped write the copy, but I read it a second time. We have Stephanie, a team member who's got a sharp eye for typos, Madison similarly. But we just, so Shrishti, the marketing person, we're all checking it. But for whatever reason, it just didn't work for this one person. And so going forward, what we'll do is ensure that because all those updates live in our investor portal, we'll make sure at the bottom of every email, it just says these, all updates are here on Agora, log in if you need access. And so, just thinking about ways just to improve because for whatever reason, it didn't work for this person, even though we tested it. So we're going to ensure that they have access to it one way or another. Right. So it's just those little ideas and little things that come up, right? It's like, instead of saying, well, it worked for me, it must be his issue. It's like, no, let's just make it easier because at the end of the day, something broke, something went wrong. And so, if it's not through the link, they can find it here. And so, just those little things add up to a big thing over time. That's that aspirational component. You're never going to be perfect, but the more you work at it, the better it becomes.
Yeah, for sure. And so this guarantee, where where communication got really down in me that was important is, John, you and I, we've sold tens of thousands of properties through the years. And so communication we knew is always important, but where it really hit home for me was I was actually invested in a deal with another group. This is a number of years ago. And what ended up happening was the group that we were investing with, it wasn't in real estate. It was an alarm system company where you actually bought in. And my advisor had said, this is actually, it's a good opportunity. There's some cash flow to it. And then they're going to be packaging up and selling and you can get X amount of return. So, I took his insights and I said, okay, that sounds good. Here's some funds. Well, about a year goes by and I got a message from my brother, and because my brother had gone into the deal as well. And he said, hey, did you hear these guys are going bankrupt? And I was like, oh, no. Well, I guess there had been a couple of emails, but I didn't get a call from my advisor. And I didn't know. I didn't see. And they were putting a petition around to say, we're actually going to be going from a legal perspective, and you can throw another $500 and then, you can pretty much go after them as well. Well, for me, it was like, they were already bankrupt and it was like, throwing kind of good money after bad. But the key is that it had gone bankrupt and I didn't get the communication. And so this was coupled with the fact that the ongoing communications along the way were not consistent and they weren't in depth. And, there was no sort of heads up. It was like bang. So it wasn't like, we're in some challenges. It was like bang. And so this is where it became very clear to me that communication, whether things are going well or not well, need to be communicated in a time efficient manner. Now, I know there's things, during a deal that, when it comes to details, that investors don't need to know every tiny little thing, but they need to know the overall story and what's happening on an ongoing basis so that they're definitely in the loop. And if a deal starts to go sideways, that's actually right in there, some challenges that we're working through to actually be put in there. And so that is really at the basis of this communication guarantee, is that I went through that myself. And I know, John, you have kind of your own experience when it comes to the inconsistencies with other groups. So this communication guarantee was birthed from the fact that we were on the other side of the fence, so to speak, which gives us really good perspective. They say that the best mentors and the best coaches were the ones that were in the exact spot that the student was in, and they have insight and perspective of what it's like actually being in their shoes. And so they can connect with people. So if people go through and say they went through, they were an alcoholic and they overcame that. Well, if somebody was an alcoholic, they have perspective and empathy at a different level because they experience that. And, you can take that into anything. If it's, tinnitus with, hearing, or, you're in the war, whatever that experience was, you can connect with whoever it is that you're working with at a much deeper level. And in this case, that's where this guarantee actually came from, actually being on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, that's huge. And yes, I've had more inconsistent, but I had a group that said, we're going to try to get better about doing these quarterly. And that was 9 months ago, and I haven't seen one since. So, I get a simple email occasionally, never on any sort of predictable cadence, and things seem to be going great. I'm not ultra concerned. But, when you invest money, right, it'd just be nice to hear. And so I've given some feedback through their investor relations portal, and they've said they've received it, but still haven't seen any changes. So, just frustrating. These hard-earned money, all of our investors, Mark, have spent a lifetime accruing this wealth, right? They've worked hard. They've had sleepless nights, all to support their family. And, in our view, like it's kind of the least we can do, at the end of the day, it's something we put a lot of thought and attention into. So we're not treating it like it's the least we can do. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's just such a simple thing, and it's such an important thing. And, the challenges come up in every plan, right? There's no perfect plan. As Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and
John, this is the thing, you get busy, and unless you make it important, like the reason why we put this guarantee in is to hold us accountable. We call it a catalytic mechanism. And so that's why I think Google reviews have been so good for customer service overall, because if a company gives bad customer service, they're going to get poor reviews. And so you see a lot of businesses out there where they're serving customers, B2C businesses, where it's actually forcing them to deliver good service. And so that's the same thing with this. If you can guarantee something, it forces your company to make it important, because there's no like, oh, we forgot to do it today. There's no sort of repercussion. But if, as the owner, you say, this is really important, I want to make sure this happens on an ongoing basis. How can I make sure of that? It's like, well, there's going to be a feedback loop that's going to be very painful if you don't follow through. And it's scary actually saying that at the beginning, because it's one thing when you're feeling, you get a business going and you're like, we're going to do this. But then, in year 3, when you have stuff going on, businesses coming out of your ears, and you're busy and you got a couple of bombs going off here and there. In business, that's the way sometimes it goes. It's very, very easy to let things slip. And so by having the guarantee, it forces you to do what is most important. And that's where, when it came down to investing with groups, communication, of course, getting great returns, protecting the downside is really important, but communication was a big one that we've spoken with thousands of investors, and communication, that's ultimately where it comes down to. And a lot of times it's not like they're telling us directly, they're giving us feedback from other groups that now they're investing with us, are like, the communication's great. Mark, the communication's great. I've never had communication with any of our other deals like that. This is fantastic. It's got everything. Because I'm always looking for feedback. I'm on with investors like, what's one thing we could do to improve the monthly update? Like, Mark, it's got everything there. Like, it's wonderful. It's consistent. It's got everything. And we got pictures. We got, what does everything mean? It's simple in regards to the communication, and not saying we're perfect. We're still looking for feedback along the way, but making it important within the company and putting in this catalytic mechanism, it forces you to keep it important. And it doesn't just force you, it forces all of your team members. Because if there's a sting that happens, the team members will not want to let it let it down. And look, John, you and me on a Sunday, we're both texting our marketing director, just by the way, we're good, right? Not that we have to. I know Shirisi's on it, but it keeps it top of mind for us as well, which is not a bad thing for the investors.
No, for sure. And, in our early days, the first few updates, right, maybe we were providing not enough information, too much information. We got feedback in from our investors, and we have landed on a consistent format. And I think that's another factor. We've said the word consistent, right? Consistent in timing, but also consistent in the approach to the updates. So, we just want to make it easy. And investors should be able to open it up. And if they have something that's like top of mind for them, like that they can just scan down and find it in 2 seconds because they know exact formatting, right? Because every month it has that consistent. So, you mentioned photos, right? One thing we've observed, it was interesting actually where we realized this was in our newsletter. We send out a newsletter on a weekly basis. And the items that get clicked on the most were always the property updates. So renovation in progress, or just, maybe the 28-day transformation. And we do a video showing the completion. It just had a massive click-through rate. And so we're like, okay, clearly people like this. So let's make sure every update includes some recent photos. So, we're refreshing flowers at springtime in the South. So we're putting in fresh flowers. So just a simple photo, hey, new spring flowers have been put in. Our property management company designed some new flyer banners that actually attach to the light poles and look beautiful. So include that. It could be simple things like that, but it just shows folks what's happening. Then we go down to obviously the property performance level. So just to back up a little bit, we do a monthly on the 30th of each month, but on the first month of every new quarter, we do a quarterly update of the previous quarter. So it's a more robust version of that monthly update. So on a monthly basis, when it's just that monthly update, it's the property performance as well as occupancy. Simple language, we've touched on that a few times, but sometimes you're in the industry, right? And it's interesting, our asset manager, she's awesome, but she writes some of the commentary, and there was just some like acronyms like, oh, this was dissolved or whatever. And it's like, well, I know that means, Property Owners Association, POA is what the acronym was. But with our investors, right? So, just having multiple eyes on it so we can simplify things and spell things out in a way so there's no guesswork or the goal here is to make people feel informed, not, maybe like they lack knowledge, right? And, the occupancy we put into chart format. So it's really easy to see. One thing we've also found that's quite successful and our investors love is we actually show the pre-renovated rent, the post-renovated rent, and then the potential value created by that rent lift. So you can see how things are moving along, and then those wins, and then that value being created.
John, you just stole my thunder, because that is my favorite part of the investor. I was like getting all ready for John. My favorite part of the of the update is seeing the rent lifts. Like that to me is the most exciting thing on a monthly basis. Is we actually show what the previous months are for all of our unit turnovers when we get either renewal or we get a new lease signed. We show what the previous lease rents were and then the new rents. And we're seeing, John, when we're seeing like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, $700 a month lift per unit in some cases. And then we actually show, okay, based on a 5 cap, this is the value, potential value creation. Well, based on a 5 cap, that is the value creation, not potential. In the building. And so seeing that on a monthly basis, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. I already know that, but when I see that and then it's all stacked together as an investor, John, you and I together in this, investing in the deals, that to me is one of my favorite parts, because that if you are getting increase in X amount of rent, you're increasing the value of the building, and thus your investment is actually going up. And so you get to see month over month the upside in the building in a real way. Like we actually put here's the unit number, and here's the new rents that we're getting in this month. So that's my favorite part of the monthly update.
Yeah, mine too, for sure. But then we, have some wins, right? Some challenges. Yeah. We actually always include recent Google reviews. So at the property level, we get 2 or 3, 4 or 5 a month in most cases. So we include those. And then on a quarterly level, we actually provide the full financials, distribution history. We do monthly distributions at Faris Capital Partners. Some groups do quarterly. We like monthly. So just an update on that, just kind of, are we on track, off track? And then in the quarterly, we also include some robust market commentary at the market level and then the sub-market level with graphs and charts just showing trends and, things that we're anticipating over the next few months and potentially a few years, depending on what the data is showing. So, once again, just that consistency, not only in timing, but also in format and the data we're including. I have a investment in a group and they send updates monthly, but it's like some days it's a Gantt chart or some months it's a Gantt chart showing like construction progress. The next time it's just a letter, and it's great. I mean, I'm glad to get the communication on a monthly basis, to be clear, but there's no consistency in the approach to the communication. This month it was a 10-minute webinar, which was great. It's kind of interesting, right? And so I think the consistency, it's like our investors can literally set a clock, to 5 p.m. on the 30th and know that is going to show up in their inbox, right? And I think that just is one little thing that it makes a difference for our investors because they are totally informed. Yeah.
John, I think it's 11:59 p.m. There was one update actually.
Oh, was it? Okay.
11:59. I remember sending this update. This was like in the dead. It was around Christmas time, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was I was finalizing and fixing the odd typo here and there because that bothers me. It's like there's no period here, guys.
Yeah.
But it was like the last minute. It was like 11:50 something, and I'm like, I got to get this out, and so we say it on the 30th of the month. But the point there is that if it's one day late, I mean, at 12:01, that's the way we see it.
That's right.
Is that and John, that was a one-off there, pacified, right. But yeah. 11:59 p.m. So on the day, but if it's one day late, then we're buying dinner for everyone. And so it hasn't happened. I trust it won't happen. If it does happen, it'll only happen once because it's going to be very, very expensive on That's that right. end. But, if it's important to you in a business, then create a feedback loop that forces you to do it. And actually, John, for habits, that's not a bad way to go as well, right? The carrot and the stick approach, right? You give yourself a spiff or you give yourself some sort of, we'll say, reward for keeping up a habit over a certain amount of time. And, maybe there's a stick there as well, because in general, we are motivated to action through fear of failure and fear, we're more motivated to take action than the upside of gain. And so in this case here, there's some fear there that we're going to get the pain side of it. And so with habits, you can do the same thing. The pain can be, I'm going to write a check to a charity that I just hate. Right. So, and that's where it's like, if I don't deliver, I got this check there. And if you really want to have accountability, give it to a friend and have your friends, do your check-ins. And if you don't do it, then they're going to mail it. And so you don't have any say. So that's the carrot and the stick approach. And in this case, the upside is the investors are well taken care of. But on the pain side and the failure side, if we do fail, well, that's going to be painful as well in regards to thousands of dollars out of our pocket. And so, this is a guarantee that we started from the beginning, and we'll continue this through the history of the company moving forward.
That's right. And kind of similar to habits, right? Gary Keller, who started Keller Williams Real Estate, sort of had this thing in the one thing that if it's not on your calendar, it didn't happen. And so we calendar these things out, right? So there's sort of like the 15th of the month, we need to start work on it. And then, a couple days later, it's like first drafts need to be due, photos need to be due. And it's just all laid out on mine, our marketing director, and our asset manager's calendar. So there's just no excuse. It's calendared in on a recurring basis. And so it's just putting some systems in place and building that habit around it, right? And so, we make sure they're drafted and reviewed by multiple people, so we get insights from different folks that are involved in the project. But you mentioned the typo thing. My eye sometimes for that isn't as sharp, as others, right? So I know that, so I read them and I look for the things, but I know that Madison's going to miss or she's not going to miss a missing period or a word that's like maybe
that's our CPA. So she's super detailed, Madison. Yeah.
She doesn't miss a detail. So, and then, even Stephanie, your executive assistant there, she has a
degree in journalism. So yeah. That's been a real asset for sure.
Leverage the team. That's right. So, everyone on the team at the end of the day knows it's all about going full out when it comes to this communication. And, Mark, you sit at the top kind of with the critical eye in a good way of saying, hey, this is kind of weak, or I don't know that this is clear enough. Can we add to that? So, really effectively, almost everybody in the company is taking a look at these and giving input on
That's
them.
Right.
That's right.
No, it's good to rip it apart. And we've come to we'll say an outline now that we like. But that's what best experience is all about. We'll keep getting feedback, and maybe we'll see something that's better, and then we'll top it up and improve it. But the monthly updates with the guarantee that we back up, and then our distributions at the beginning of the month as well. The consistency, what this does is it builds trust, it builds confidence, and it helps build the relationship, knowing that trust is something that you're going to get it, and there's consistency. And the cool thing to know is that if you're getting that kind of consistency and there's excellence with the communication updates, you better believe on a daily basis that the company is keeping things tight. It's because it goes back to, John, I know you said this before, is that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And so excellence, this is one of the key things that we really focus on here. And the communication is one part of it. But how we do anything is how we do everything. That's our approach to it. And, moving forward there, the communication is going to be something that we'll keep for the long term.
That's right. Well, once again, fulloutinvesting.com. Do not sleep on that incredible resource. If you're interested in learning more, once again, not only about Faris Capital Partners and our specific approach to apartment investing, but also just a great overview of apartment investing, go to fulloutinvesting.com, watch that video, download that sample deal, and book in that call with Mark so you can get the process started.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share with other high net worth investors that you think will benefit from it. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.